Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Colin Simpson. I'd like to welcome you to the Empire Energy Poverty Technical Workshop. So I'm going to present you over now to Enda Hogan, who's the Assistant Director of the Southern Regional Assembly, and he will just give his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, for the introduction, and good morning all. And thank you, by the way, to 3CEA for your work on this event. So my name is Enda Hogan. I'm the Assistant Director with the Southern Regional Assembly, and on behalf of the Southern Regional Assembly, I just want to extend a very warm welcome to all of the Empire Project partners and stakeholders and the invited speakers and guests here this morning. In particular, look, thanks to those of you who couldn't travel for joining us online. I'm one of those joining online this morning. I very much hoped to be there in Cork, but I'm smothered with a cold and decided it wasn't a very good idea. But look, for those of you who were able to travel, thanks again for making the trip to Cork. We're delighted to have you here in the Southern region. Look, before I go any further, I do just want to briefly acknowledge the crisis in Ukraine. Ireland, along with the countries of our Empire Project partners, offer sympathy and support at this very difficult time to the people of Ukraine. And I just particularly like to highlight the amazing support that we're seeing on the front line offered by Poland. I know we Polish Empire Project partners here with us this morning in Cork. So thanks for traveling, and you might bring that message back to your colleagues. So look, the introduction here this morning is going to be relatively brief. I suppose really what I want to do is give you a very quick introduction to the Southern Regional Assembly, those of you who don't know us, but also explain to you, give you some context as to why energy poverty and this work around energy poverty is of particular importance and relevance to us as an organisation. So I'll do that really by framing it in terms of two key areas of our work. One is the regional, spatial and economic strategy, and the other is our work with ERDF regional programs, both the current program in the 14-20 programming period and the incoming regional program for 21-27. And then I'll just highlight a couple of challenges that we have more from a programming perspective, an ERDF programming perspective, but look, I think they're wider than that as well. Again, I'm conscious sometimes Rose may have presented this to you a few times, so I won't dwell too much. But first off, I should just mention the Southern region. This is the Southern region. So the red counties at the bottom of the map of Ireland there constitute the Southern region. We have three large cities. We have Cork, where you are this morning, Waterford and Limerick, and the Limerick-Shannon metropolitan area. So a population of just over 1.5 million, very vibrant and dynamic region. And I'll just move on then just to say, I suppose, our role in terms of this region. Really, this diagram, I hope you can all see it. The red circles relate to our role in relation to regional, spatial and economic strategy. I could probably summarize this for you in this way. We have two core roles. One is around regional, spatial and economic planning, and the other is around EU funding and EU programs. So if I focus on the red circles for a minute, the key one there is that we prepare and oversee the implementation of the regional, spatial and economic strategy for the Southern region. We also coordinate and promote and support strategic planning and sustainable development of the regions in general. And then we coordinate actions to support effectiveness in local government and public services. So we have this, I suppose, linkage role with between local government, the local authorities and national government, and try to promote coordination across the region. The blue circles relate to our role with regard to EU funding. So we're the managing authority for ERDF co-financed regional programs. We are currently closing out the third of these regional programs, and we have a fourth one now in development and hopefully to be approved this year. So we have a long history in these ERDF regional programs. We also act as the contact point for EU-funded transnational programs. So the Interreg programs, and then we provide first-level control services for ETC projects in Ireland, and we facilitate an ECT network in our region. And finally, and not least, we support and we participate ourselves as partners in EU-funded projects, including the Empower project. So we touch on a lot of different projects through our activities, EU-funded projects that are very closely linked to the energy efficiency and the energy poverty topics that we'll be looking at today. Just a few words then on the regional spatial and economic strategy for the Southern region. It's a strategic policy document, and it sets out our vision for the economic development of the region out to 2031. The overarching purpose of the REIS is to support the implementation of the national planning framework and government economic policy. So we are translating, I suppose, national policy at a regional level. And we set the framework then for local planning and economic development within our region. The REIS's vision, you can summarize it effectively to say, look, our vision is to nurture all our places to realize their full potential, to protect and enhance our environment, to successfully combat climate change, to achieve economic prosperity and improve quality of life for all of our citizens, and to accommodate expanded growth and development in suitable locations. And in summary, really, our vision is to make the Southern region one of Europe's most creative and innovative and greenest and livable regions. So those themes of protecting our environment and combating climate change and improving the quality of life for all of our citizens, they're all really key to the topics we're discussing at this Empower Technical Workshop. And if you delve into the detail of the REIS itself, the REIS contains a number of regional policy objectives, actually quite a number of regional policy objectives, but three in particular are relevant here. They address regional decarbonisation and fuel poverty. So really the key message here is that the REIS sets a really important regional policy context, and it's one of the main reasons, I suppose, that we're very interested in this work that we're doing here through the Empower project. And I should say thanks to Catherine, who's moving my slides on. You're doing great. That's a great help to me. Okay, so I'll just move quickly on then to the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programs, starting with the one that's for the current or outgoing programming period, the 2014 to 2020 programming period. Some of you will know, and I see Eileen from the department is speaking to you later this morning. We've worked with Eileen and her colleagues in the department for quite a number of years now in the delivery of a really important program or scheme within our program in the area of energy poverty, and that's the Better Energy Warmer Home scheme. This was included in our program, designed in from the very beginning, and it is targeted at low-income households at risk of energy poverty, and it had, I suppose, three kind of simple goals: to improve energy efficiency of the homes, to reduce the disposable income being spent on energy, and to improve the health and well-being of occupants. And within our region alone, and by the way, this particular scheme is also funded in the other regions in Ireland, but within our region alone, between 2014 and 2019, we invested over 82 million in the delivery of these energy efficiency measures into over 20,000 households. So very successful from our perspective, really having a big impact in our region, delivered by colleagues in SEAI and then co-financed by ERDF and the Government of Ireland. But not without its challenges, just in terms of maybe this tension between maximizing the return in terms of energy efficiency and also addressing energy poverty. And I'm going to come to that briefly in my concluding remarks. I'll talk to you about some of the challenges around, I suppose, this tension between maximizing energy efficiency and energy poverty, addressing energy poverty. So if we could just move on. Okay, so the current program, I just want to give people a quick insight into the current program. Sorry, the incoming program, excuse me. So the incoming program for the 21-27 period is called the Southern, Eastern and Midland Regional Program. Now, I've mentioned to you before that we are the Regional Assembly for the Southern region, which is that area in red and orange at the bottom of the map. But we're in the new program 21-27, we're also the managing authority. The program area is extended, and it takes in the Eastern and Midland region there that you can see to the right of the map. So that's Dublin and the surrounding counties. And then, so that's one regional program, and the second regional program is the Northern and Western program up to the north and west of the map of Ireland, as you'd expect. So our program, the total value of the program that we're managing this time is 664 million euros. And of that, 30% is going to be allocated. It's a minimum requirement that 30% is allocated towards this policy objective 2, which is addressing climate change. So I'll give you a bit more detail on that in a minute. Just to talk to you about how we designed the program. Some of you will be familiar with this, but effectively you're looking at a process that takes in a needs analysis for the region, takes in public consultation, and then you're looking to see emerging policies both at European level and at a national level, because these things don't always, I suppose, arrive at one particular point in time. You're keeping a close eye on what's evolving. But the key documents there, the starting point for us is always the regional, spatial and economic strategy for our region, because that's the most extensive, I suppose, analysis of needs within our region. We look to the country-specific reports that are produced by the European Commission for 2019 and 2020. We had an independent needs analysis carried out. There was a public consultation. We looked at what was being done in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan and in the National Development Plan. It's a piece there around smart specialisation, and then in particular the Climate Action Plan, and most recently published in February, the Town Centre First Policy. And the reason I throw up that list, those documents all feed very much into our regional programme. But what's interesting is that you'll find that energy efficiency in residential buildings and energy poverty are mentioned in every one of those bar the smart specialisation strategy. So it's been very clearly defined throughout the policy documents that this is an area that we need to address. And in particular, the Climate Action Plan and the section within it, which is the National Retrofit Plan, which both calls out the need, but it also calls out, I suppose, the role for the regional programmes. So we'll just then look briefly at the regional programme itself. This is a draft programme, and it will go for public consultation through a strategic environmental assessment. I think next week. It'll first get its first kind of airing in public, but we expect that this programme will be submitting to the Commission, you know, in the early summer, and hope to have it approved this year. I think on my screen, I'm just missing the very bottom, what that blue arrow is pointing out. I don't know if anyone else can see it, but effectively what we're saying is that 30% of our total budget is being given over to one particular area. There are 8 specific objectives within policy objective 2 in the area of combating climate change, and they range from everything from renewable energy to energy efficiency to sustainable urban mobility to the circular economy. But we want to focus our resources in one particular area to have the maximum, so impact and visibility, because there's a huge amount of investment required across all those other areas. And you know, this is recognised in the Climate Action Plan, and it's being funding, exchequer funding is being channeled in that direction. So we're focusing all of our resources on this particular area of energy efficiency of residential homes. And within that, we're focusing on the actions that support those at risk of energy poverty. So the blue arrow on my screen is pointing at the amount, which is that there's 75 million of EURDF and 113 million of national funding going towards a total of 188 million towards tackling energy efficiency in residential home and addressing energy poverty in the region. So I think you're getting the point, I suppose, I'm trying to make, is that this is really critical to us in the rollout of our regional programme. So I just want to, I suppose, finish by mentioning some of the challenges that we face from an ERDF regional programming perspective. And I think these are challenges that the work that you're doing through the Empower project and through this workshop in particular can help us to address. When you're submitting a regional program, you provide a justification for the selection of this type of action. So, you know, you really have to, I suppose, make a strong case for why you've chosen to focus your resources in this particular area, and that requires an evidence base, which we're fortunate that colleagues here have done quite a lot of work on this. So some of those speaking this morning, and Rose through the Empower project as well has been able to share with us quite a bit of information from the Empower project in terms of energy poverty in particular. We also have to justify the form of support. So we have to make, if we want to use grants, and we do, versus financial instruments, then we need to be able to support that, the reasons for that, and why we believe that financial instruments are not particularly suitable for in this instance. They are being used for residential energy efficiency measures for those who are not in energy poverty, but we don't believe they're suitable in this instance. And perhaps that's something, you know, our partners are looking at themselves. Really, the key one for us then is around this idea of monitoring performance and the design and selection of output indicators and result indicators. So I suppose those of us who are involved in the current programme would know that the European Court of Auditors came and they had a look, not just at Ireland, at quite a number of member states, and they examined the energy efficiency schemes that were being delivered through the regional programmes. And they pressed very heavily on this question as to whether or not the regional programmes had been designed in a way that would absolutely maximise the return in terms of the energy efficiency gain for the ERDF money put in. And you know, they concluded that no, they weren't. Now that was no surprise to us, because if you remember, the objectives we said we had from the outset was that we also wanted to address energy poverty. So there was this tension there, and we noted then that in the recitals of the new regulations for ERDF regional funding, that it explicitly says that one of the goals of regional programs, you know, one of the most legitimate actions that we can have is to address energy poverty, so that there's no debate about that. It's a legitimate goal, a legitimate ambition for us to have. But even with that, you know, some of the conversations we've had with colleagues in the Commission are, well, how exactly are you going to measure the impact of your actions on energy poverty? We can see you've selected the common indicators that are there for measuring improvements in energy efficiency, but you know, we're being asked, well, specifically on energy poverty, how are you going to address these needs? So this is, the Commission weren't actually giving us the answers to this either, although I know there's a lot of work being done there, and I know we have a colleague here from the Energy Advisory who's done a lot of work, but I guess what I'm saying is that there aren't common output indicators that are available for us to select. So we need to do a significant piece of work around that and evaluating the impact of any of the work we do. And that brings us to the last piece, the evaluation of impact. So it's not just about the indicators. What we want to do in the new programming period is to really step up our evaluation of these measures and try and do some really worthwhile work around measuring the impact of our actions on energy poverty. So I hope I've conveyed to you the importance of the work you're doing to our work, and we really welcome the work that's being done through the Empower project. I'm going to close on that, I suppose, just by saying a big thank you to everybody who's been involved in organising the event, to Rose and Catherine and the rest of the team. I know we've presentations now from colleagues in the Energy Advisory Hub, in the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, and from UCC. So I want to thank Dora and Niall and Eileen for being with us this morning and for working with us on the Empower project. And with that, look, I know we have a very packed agenda and you have a lot of work to do, so I won't hold you up any longer. I just want to wish you all very well with your work, and for those of you staying in Cork, I hope you're being very well looked after and that you enjoy your visits in the southern region of Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, Enda. As I said, my name's Colin Simpson. I work for the Three Counties Energy Agency. So I'm responsible for housing delivery and commercial delivery across the agency. I'm joined here today by my colleague Colin O'Mahony, who works in the housing section with me. I'm also here presenting on behalf of the Southern Regional Assembly, who we've been working with on this project. Joined here by Rose Power and Catherine Connaughton from the Regional Assembly. Just one from Enda there, in terms of Enda has kind of given an overview of the Regional Assembly's work generally in how they're looking to tackle energy poverty. So what we have done, the four of us, which is myself, Colin, my colleague, Rose and Catherine, is we have focused on the Empower project. And basically what the Empower project does, and it says it here on the tin, it's aiming to reduce the carbon output by dynamically monitoring energy efficiency in buildings, with special focus on the use of innovative financial instruments. So from that, what we've done is we've gone around Europe, we've looked at the best practices in terms of reducing energy poverty. Over the last 6 months, we've been doing this, and what we've done is we've peer reviewed loads of stuff, and we've basically come up with, I think it's a top 10 of what we would consider best in class, good initiatives and looking at tackling energy poverty. So this is what this workshop is all about. It's basically promoting those, and we're going to do a good practice guidebook at the end of this. I think it's next month. So we will disseminate out to local authorities. So hopefully the work that we've done now will actually turn into practical use down the line. So the mission of 3CA is to be a leader in sustainable, efficient use of locally produced clean energy, delivering low carbon homes, jobs and enterprise within our region. And our mission is to play a strategic role regionally, partnering with members and stakeholders supporting their energy transition through to 2030 and beyond. So some of the projects that we've been involved in at 3CA, we do lots of different things across a broad spectrum of different things. So we do, for example, projects which focus on data monitoring of deep retrofits. We look at low carbon affordable housing schemes. We're involved in biomethane gas storage and consumption, which is a project that we're trying to develop and push out across the local authorities in the regions. We're also involved in HGV, the transport sector. So we're working on a greener HGV, which is the data monitoring and driver training of HGV users. We're involved in energy storage, which includes testing and evaluating battery storage systems on sites. We are involved with UCD on a heat pump project. So we're doing pre and post works heat pump analysis to see if heat pumps are performing as per what the manufacturers claim they do. We're involved in a project called Energy Watch, which is a peer-to-peer learning with local authorities to define, monitor and verify their sustainable actions. We're also involved with SEAI on the National Housing Retrofit Scheme, where we operate a one-stop shop program to bring people from idea to finalisation of their project and facilitate all their grants, contractors, etc. along the journey. We also manage the BEC scheme, which is an SEAI funded scheme, which we look at developing grants for SMEs, domestic communities, and we facilitate grant aid on their behalf. In terms of the area of fuel poverty, 3CA are consultants and we work heavily in this area. We're involved in numerous fuel poverty initiatives with academia, such as UCD, NUIG, and various other grant institutions, local authorities, assisted housing bodies, and private homeowners. We're also the Irish antenna for the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub here in Ireland. And in this regard, we host webinars and we disseminate information related to fuel poverty on behalf of the EPAH in Ireland. In terms of the national targets which we're trying to achieve, Ireland has to deliver 500,000 homes retrofitted to building standard B2 or cost optimal by 2030. So therefore we need to install 400,000 heat pumps to existing premises. We need to greatly increase the depth and volume of electric retrofits to meet this target. In terms of the region that we work in, as you can see, we have 109,000 homes in our region. 102,000 of these are below a B2. 32,000 need to achieve B2 by 2030, which will require an investment of nearly €1 billion. And within our region, we have 37,132 homes who will be classed as fuel poor. And probably within the last 6 months, I would imagine that number has increased due to all the energy crisis which is going on at the moment. So in terms of the 37,000 homes, what we try to do to alleviate fuel poverty, we're working on these different initiatives through SEAI. And to date, we've delivered 1,175 domestic retrofit projects, which is a total capex of nearly €20 million, which has delivered monetary savings to the occupants of over €1 million. We've avoided nearly €4 million of CO2, 4 million kilos of CO2. In terms of the one-stop shop process, what happens is a customer comes into us, they say they want to get some retrofit work done on their house, and we basically bring them along the journey and we do all the work for them. And in terms of looking ahead, we've now got Waterford County and City Council who have joined our family, so we can no longer be called 3CEA. We looked at 4CEA, but it didn't sound too good. So we had a vote in our organisation and we decided that we needed to have a rebrand. So in June 2022, we're going to be known as the South East Energy Agency going forward. And in that regard, I would say I'd like to thank you all and I welcome you all today to the event. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. Our first speaker now is Dora Biondani, who's from the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. So I'd like to pass you over to Dora now. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, unfortunately not in presence in Ireland, even if I would have wished to support our antennas part of the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. So today I would like to go through a little bit introduction about energy poverty and what it is the approach and the methodology we are promoting to tackle energy poverty, and then give some additional insight about what the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub is giving as services to the different local government to start their action. We can go to the next slide. So, energy poverty, as probably you already know, has not a common and shared definition yet. If we look at what the Commission used to define it, the sentence used is that energy poverty is a situation in which households are unable to access essential energy services. This is a quite broad and definition that can be helped to understand, but there is the need to enter a little bit into more detail of what defines energy poverty. Next slide. So, energy poverty can be considered both a social and technical challenge because it combines different aspects. From one side, we have the technical aspect of how heat and cool the houses and how this affects the general well-being. But then there are other topics that enter into the perspective. So, and these are like identifying the vulnerable consumers, promote a social inclusion, and increase the well-being of people. Next slide. If we look at the household level, we can identify and simplify it with three main challenges. One is connected to the energy efficiency of the household, one it refers to the income level of the families, and the third about energy prices, that is a geopolitical external factor that influences the threshold that defines energy poverty. Let's move to the next slide. So the methodology we identified as process to start taking action on energy poverty is based on a circular approach that starts with a diagnosis. So the first thing is to completely identify what it is the baseline in the current moment at the local level that define the energy poverty. As we have seen, there are different elements that influence energy poverty, and thus it can be presented itself differently according not only at national level, but also at local level. Each cities can have a different perspective and different realities going on. The diagnosis is thus important to identify concretely what is the most impactful element at the local level. With the diagnosis, what we will have to release, it's a document that provides data to support the planning process. The planning process for us, it means to include the social aspect in the ongoing climate plan of the cities. and thus identify which action can be done to better tackle it and have the higher impact in the shorter time. Once included in the social climate plan, it's important to move to the implementation. The implementation, we consider it not only as the deployment of the different activities, but also the keep monitoring of what is going on and to understand if there is new people entering into energy poverty due to fact that we are not foreseen. For example, nowadays we assisted with an increase of energy prices due to the war in Ukraine, and this can change our understanding and level of energy poverty. At the end of the implementation, it's important to go back to the phase of diagnosis with what is called an impact assessment. So going back to evaluate the different parameters and indicators that has been set originally in order to calibrate the new action and going on to the second level of process. Let's move to the next slide. Let's enter into a bit more detail of what does the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub and how we can support you to start taking your action. Next slide. So first of all, the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub is constituted by different organizations. We have a basic consortium of 5 organizations, but then we have different antennas supporting us, dislocated in different countries of Europe. And in this case, considering these events, we have 3CA in Ireland to serve specifically for your context. Let's move to the next slide. So the foundation of the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. We build on the shoulder of the Energy Poverty Observatory, that was the previous phase focused on understanding and analyzing the energy poverty. We take from their steps and their precious insights, and we build on to support to implement active actions. We also work in strict collaboration with the Covenant of Mayors, with which are specifically developing the indicators for energy poverty that will be requested for the second plan and for the signature of the Covenant of Mayors. And then we choose the methodologies and we develop the methodology that was developed by the Clean Energy for the EU Ireland. Next slide. So what is our mission? So we are the leading initiative promoted by the European Commission on request of the Parliament, and the idea is to create a collaborative network. We would like to eradicate energy poverty and accelerate the socially just and fair energy transition of local government. At this, we want to achieve as a network to become the platform with it's collected the different energy poverty expertise in Europe, and there is the sharing of knowledge accumulated all around the countries. Next slide. But how we do it, that's the most important things. Our main focus is the local level. As said, we support principally the local government, cities and municipalities to develop their action. We act to create the synergies at the different layers of governance, so to share knowledge among different cities, but also to collect their insight to promote what it can be done at national level, and then referring at European level to support as much as possible the local government. And we want, as said before, build a collaborative network. Next slide. So what we provide, there are some tools that are already available on our website. The first one, it's a report, well, the report that has been last released, it's this report, Bridging Energy Poverty Research into Local Practice. This is a literal review, maybe for a little bit more specialized people about what is going on energy poverty. Then there are the report and the atlas. The Tackling Energy Poverty Through Local Action. It's a report with 24 inspirational cases that can be used to understand what are the actions going on and what it can be done, taking them as examples of with the pro and cons and how to start implementing. Even more cases are reported in the online EPA Atlas that has more than 250 cases spread all across Europe, but also worldwide, where you can find ideas of what it has been done. The EPA Atlas is also open to submission, and we want to keep it as a collaborative tool. So we welcome whoever is starting a project or have an ongoing project on energy poverty to go online and submit their information in order to be shared with a wider audience. Let's move on. So what are the core tools that we are going to provide? The core tools is what we call handbooks. Handbooks, it's a set of 3 different documents that can support taking specific action. The idea of this document is to be very practical. The first one will focus on how to diagnose your local energy poverty situation, and it will be released around June. We are currently working on it, and it will give you a set of steps and activities and the estimation of what, how many resources are needed for each of them to start analyzing your local, your energy poverty at local level. The second handbook will focus on plan and how to include the social aspect in the climate plan. And the third one will focus on the implementation action and give an example of that. Next slide. So the other things we provide are learning opportunities. There are online courses. The first course is already available. It's a 1-hour course, so very short, with a very quick introduction about energy poverty. And it's accessible for everyone at whenever time of the year. We will have a second course released later this year that will be a 10-hour course dedicated specifically for decision maker of the different local governments, in which we will enter into detail about how to read the data available and convert them into the planning section. And then there will be a third one coming out probably next year of 25 hours that will be entered into more technical details about the different phases of the methodologies. On top of this, we would like to share knowledge from different environments through international and local events, workshops, and also what we call a learning pill, that are short videos forecasting solutions or a specific topic. Next slide. As said, the 1-hour course is already available. Next slide. So the conferences and events are organized all over Europe. We welcome you to subscribe to the newsletter on the website or to follow the website to understand when it's going to be the next one. The next one that we foresee, it's probably the big one is going to probably be in the end, late June, but we are normally present also on different events. Another thing is that we see the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub website, not only for the Advisory Hub activities, but for all the activities going on energy poverty. So in case you are organizing an event or you are having some production of some documents, report, feedback about your projects that you believe it's worth to share with all the communities working on energy poverty, please be in touch with us and we will try to channel through our website. Next slide. What we do also it's a specific direct support. The direct support has 2 main channels. The first one is an help desk that is always available. You can submit and send us an email asking indication, and we will give you the direction of the best tool for you to go on in your action. The second one, it's a call for technical assistance for tackle energy poverty. The call for technical assistance, the first call for technical assistance just closed the 15th of March. I would like to take here a specific moment to discuss about it because the call is designed to cover all Europe. So there are some geographical quota from the different regions. And unfortunately, we have not seen so many participation to this first call from the northern country. So later on, if there is the chance not only of question, but if you want to understand more for the second call that is going to come out next year, I kindly invite you to reach out to us and explain which tool you will need to more effectively and successfully apply to it. Just to give you an idea, because sometimes it's a little bit confusing what it is a call for technical assistance. So in this case, what we are aiming is to support municipalities at whatever level they are to start their action or going on interaction to tackle energy poverty. How we will do it? So we will put at your service the expertise of the Energy Advisory Hub, but also of other national experts that can support you to do whatever you need. So what we are asking to submit, it's a specific request that can be very broad. It can start from we have the feelings that there is energy poverty at local level, but we don't know how to specifically diagnose this and identify. Thus, we require an expert to helping us doing that. Or it can be even more specific, like we already know our context and we would like someone to design with us a specific action or implement action that can do it. I invite you to really reach out and following our events, where in the future we will release what have been the technical assistance awarded right now, and it can give more inspiration of what you can submit next year during the next call. Let's move to the next slide. Here there are some references, so you can find the website. The help desk, it's info@energypoverty.eu. Here you can also submit whatever question you have, not only on energy poverty, but on the different tools. Our social main channel is Twitter. And here there is also the direct link to access the newsletter. And I think this presentation will be shared with you, so you will have access to all the different links.
Thank you, Dora.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Dora? Any from the room? No? Any online?
Dora, actually, it's Rose here from the Southern Assembly. I have a quick question for you before we look at what's online. You mentioned earlier on that there's no common definition for energy poverty across Europe. Mm-hmm. Is there anybody in the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub looking into how we could standardize that across Europe, or has research been done to say that that's not possible, that in each country it's a different metric?
Yes, so as said, we are working more on the indicator side and with the Covenant of Mayor and the Commission to support them identify the indicator. However, what we believe is that energy poverty can present itself really in different perspectives at local level. Thus, having a standardized, very strict definition all over Europe, it can be tricky. And so we are participating in the definition but what we would like to promote more is that the local governments came out with their idea of energy poverty and specifically diagnosing what is more impacting their realities. Because really, even in the same country, from one city to the other, due to the, I don't know, climate condition, income condition, or some other socioeconomical parameter, how energy poverty presents itself, it can be very different. And what we will not like to see is that a standardized definition block the governments to take action for it. So this is our work on the indicator side to provide some useful information that can be used, but at the same time leave the freedom to identify what it is the best for the local realities. It's a balance between giving support, but understanding also what is going on at the local level.
Thank you very much for that, Dora.
I see a question in the chat, so I don't know if...
do you only include energy use in buildings when working with energy poverty, or both buildings and transport?
We work at a broader aspect of energy poverty, so both buildings and mobility. Right now, to be clear, the requests of technical assistance we have received are more focusing on the building rehabilitation in connection with the renovation waves, are focusing on energy communities, are focusing on one-stop shops. So at the moment, we don't have a request of specific mobility energy poverty. But we are open to the broader perspective of energy poverty.
Can I just remind everyone that's online, if you want to ask a question, you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself if you want to put a question directly to Dora, or if you want to raise your hand and we'll invite you to unmute yourself. And likewise, if you're more comfortable, you can put a question into the chat at any stage and we will address that. I just have one final question for you, Dora, if you don't mind, and it's just purely curiosity. Were there any applications from Ireland for technical assistance in the first call?
So we will release soon all the data about the call. If I recall correctly, there was only one submitted proposal from Ireland. And this is why I was saying it's kind of an unfortunate, and we are trying to understand as us to support your country more to confidently apply to the next call for technical assistance. Anyway, do not forget that the tool we are designing, especially the handbooks, should provide you information to start implementing action, even without the access to the technical assistance. So let's say the core of the services we provide is the methodology, and you can follow up with the different documents, even independently. But if you want an additional dedicated expert to you, of course, applying to the call for a proposal, it's the next step.
Thank you very much, Dora. Any questions in the room? Dora?
No?
No?
Okay, thank you, Dora. I'm going to go to Dr. Niall Dunphy from UCC, who's in the room, and he's going to present on energy poverty in Ireland. So I'll pass you up to Niall.
Thank you.
Do, yeah, jump up.
Yes, please. Okay, hello everyone. Well, my name is Niall Dunphy and I'm from University College Cork, so I didn't have all that far to come this morning. So it's very nice to be here, and thank you to Rose and team for inviting me to speak. I'm going to speak a little bit about my research group at UCC, the work that we do and how it relates to energy poverty, looking at some definitions of energy poverty, which follow on nicely from the last speaker, and then just heading into the kind of work that we're doing in Ireland on that issue. So my research group is a multidisciplinary team, both engineers, scientists, social scientists. I'm co-located in the School of Engineering and Architecture and the Environmental Research Institute, and we carry out research, engaged research on the theme of society, sustainability and energy. And really our focus is looking at people's relationship with energy, how they use energy, how they interact with energy, how they feel about energy, and what it means to what their daily lives and in their work life. So this is a couple of our current projects. So we have projects on looking at building standards on energy and what householders think of that. So that's the EUB Super Hub. We have a project on energy citizenship, what that might mean, what it should mean, what it could mean, and how it will impact on the energy transition, impacts on the acceptability of technologies like carbon capture and storage, looking at people's I suppose reaction to energy projects, social mobilization around new energy projects. We have projects on energy communities, offshore wind, wave energy, and so forth. So we've quite a range of projects. The one that I'm going to refer to a little bit today is energy measures, which is a project that we're leading. It's a Horizon 2020 project focused on supporting energy poor householders across Europe by deploying small measures. So it's not large retrofit, it's very much focused on small measures and behavioural advice and support over a number of years. That's what we're working on in that area. So energy poverty, as the last speaker said, it's quite a nebulous term. I was looking at some of the US Senate hearings last night for the Supreme Court Justice nominee. I'm a bit of a geek, so that's why I was doing that. But I was reminded there was a Supreme Court Justice in the US in the 1960s, in the mid-60s, and he was talking about obscene publications. And he was asked to give a definition of what's obscene. And he says, I don't know what it is. I can't say what it is, but I know it when I see it. I think to a large extent that's energy poverty. It's very hard to define, but we know it when we see it. So it's typically described as a situation where individuals and householders are not able to adequately heat or provide other energy services in their homes that are full of cost. Because heat would also mean cool, but obviously in Ireland we typically don't include the cooling part of that. But there is no commonly agreed definition, and as the speaker from the advisory group said, it is difficult to get such a commonly agreed term. and it may not be necessarily be advantageous that way. So, this is typical background that we are familiar with. Buildings responsible for 40% of energy consumption, 75% of the EU building stock is energy efficient. Energy poverty affects 50 million people in the EU. That was 2020. Given what's happening at the moment, it's after rising already. And on average, there's about 323,000 excess deaths which are caused by cold weather in the EU, and 70,000 of those can be affected to indoor cold temperatures, energy poverty in effect. So the energy poverty then is it's not, as some are saying, just a different variation of income poverty. It's a combination of low income, but also poor building quality and the cost of energy, as we're all feeling at the moment, or we will do when we get our next bills at least. So energy poverty can manifest in a number of ways. And there's a nice quote here from the book, which says that it can result in energy debts, it can result in reduction of other budgets such as food, the great phrase, eat or heat, as they say, to a rationing of energy consumption, cold homes, and then all the knock-on effects from that, and health effects, lots of social impacts and so forth. So it's quite a multifaceted problem that we face. Measuring energy poverty is not easy. It's a very much a private condition. It's confined to the home. It varies over time and place. People move in and out of energy poverty. In Ireland, for example, we have a large amount of people, particularly in the Midlands, who harvest their own fuel, whether it be from boglands or whether it be harvested from timber. If that was restricted in any way, a lot of those people would fall into energy poverty. It's a major way that cohort will provide for themselves. So it's very much, and there's cultural aspects to it. It's very much influential. So there's a number of different ways to measure energy poverty. And before I start this, I always recall with Brenda Boardman, and many around here will be familiar with Brenda's work. She was one of the original kind of researchers in this area, and she often spoke at energy poverty events, and she said, stop worrying about measuring energy poverty, just do something about it. And sometimes we worry too much about how do we measure it, and how do we exclude people, afraid that someone might be slightly above the threshold, we might give them something. But if someone is that close to the threshold, maybe we should support them, and that's a public policy as well discussion for another day. So there are a number of different ways. One way that's often used is expenditure based. I suppose your traditional method would be 10% of your disposable income, but you have the variation with high cost of energy costs. So that's proportion of income spent on energy after a threshold. Those who spend too much, in other words. You have that your income after energy costs are below a threshold. So in other words, that your high energy spend and insufficient income. And then you have those what's known as the hidden energy poverty, those who spend too little, those who self-ration, who live in cold environments. I suppose another way of looking at it then would be looking at objective needs. So the previous expenditure-based methods that I've talked about don't distinguish between those who need to consume the energy that they're consuming and those who don't. So an alternative way, it's actually conducted by a government department in Ireland in the 2016 review, and they looked at an objective method, and they attempted to calculate what do the households need to spend. So it took data from National Household Budget Surveys, from the Building Energy Rating Database, and a bespoke kind of residential building stock model, and it compared household income to the theoretical spend on energy that would be needed to keep their homes heated to the World Health Organization recommended levels. In that way, they were able to give an objective sense of the amount of energy poverty in the country. Of course, that's quite a global sense, high level. And another one then that we'd all be familiar with is a subjective needs. If you're cold, you're in energy poverty. If you can't afford to heat your home, in energy poverty. If you have arrears, you're in energy poverty. There's an add to say that subjective, it's entirely based on household experience and his perception of his financial incapacity. And I'm not quite sure whether they were saying that as a complaint or not, but I would see that as a feature rather than a bug. Of course it is. It has to be someone's experience. So then you can see this was from a study in Belgium, and you can see the measured energy poverty is in the pink large box. The hidden energy poverty, so those that consume too little, is in the blue box. And then perceived energy poverty is in the yellow box. You can see that there are people outside of each of those. So if we only look at one measurement of energy poverty, or if we only have one definition, we're going to miss out on those people that are outside that central area. So I think it's important to look at it in a multidimensional way. So the precursor to the advisory hub, which was the Energy Poverty Observatory, produced a very useful report, Bavarsky et al. 2020, and they recommended a number of ways of looking at it. They recommended that a suite of measures should be used. So you see, self-reported ability to keep their home adequately warm or cool, household arrears from the last 12 months, energy expenditure over twice the national median, or less than half the national median. So in other words, you're either spending way too much or spending way too little. So a combination of those then could be taken. Someone is in energy poverty. So looking at then at a comparison in selected countries, you can see that Ireland, 4.4% said that they were unable to adequately heat their homes, and that's about mid-range compared to the rest of the countries. It's far less than Greece, for example, at that time. But yet, if you look at the hidden energy poverty, which is the bottom row, you see nearly 15% of Irish homes were using far too little, compared to only 13% of the Greeks. So again, we can use statistics for anything. Those who work with numbers will tell you that. But it's important, as I say again, just to re-emphasize to take a multidimensional approach to it. So we would also say that it would be useful to look at supporting indicators. So look at demographic factors, households with vulnerable members, obviously someone who is a young person, young healthy couple living in a house, living in a dwelling, they're going to have different circumstances from people that maybe have young children, people that have illnesses, people that are elderly, and so forth. Energy prices is going to be a huge issue and it's increasingly on the agenda, but there's also differential pricing in different areas of the countries. There's differential access to energy. There's not much point in telling someone in rural Ireland to go and get gas. It's not available. So all of these things need to be taken into account. Certain deliveries won't be met in certain areas. So there's a range of things like that. So the key thing to remember is the householders don't all have equal access to energy. This speaks to the end of the last speaker spoke how there will be differences between different cities, but even in different parts of the cities, there will be different availability of energies available, different choices available. So there's a concept known as food deserts, and it's where it's certain lower socioeconomic areas of cities, those that include households that are more disadvantaged, that there's less access to food. And in many respects, there's a parallel thing with energy, that there's less suppliers, there's less access, it's usually on less credit available, and typically higher prices. And then the income levels are obviously very important. So lower income households are more likely to be energy poor, no matter what way it's measured. That's just a fact of life. Household composition, the heating system, this is a 20-year-old heating system that's all plugged up, has to be maintained well. Again, the supply choice that I mentioned about. Interesting that too is the idea of supply lock-in. Maybe you're a tenant in the house, you have no choice you just have to pay the bills. You don't choose what energy comes in, or you're part of a district system of some sort. Building efficiency, teaching the age, technical characteristics of building blocks key, level of social supports, and then the tenure of building. So what tenure you have. So if you're a homeowner, you're far more choice of what you do. You can do far more things. You can, and utilities and energy suppliers will be more likely to deal with you in a different way. And those of us who own our own homes, we don't see this. This is invisible. That it's like the typical kind of middle-aged, middle-class white man, who doesn't see racism. Of course you don't, because it doesn't impact us. No, so this is so all of this is useful though measuring energy poverty, but it's all very well being able to say that there's a certain percentage of energy poverty, but how do you actually reach the energy poor? How do you identify them on the ground? This is a key thing. So it's the previous ways of statistical analysis are useful for devising policies and for measuring the success of policies. But how do you implement household targeted health? So there's a gap, as I say here, between the macro and meso levels of analysis and the identification of specific energy poor households. So what we've been doing in our work is we have been working with gatekeepers such as health professionals, debt advisors, charities, and so on forward, for referrals. We've been using a bottom-up approach where we've been holding energy clinics, reaching out to communities, actually going into communities with leaflet drops, talking to people, really asking people to self-refer themselves to our supports. And then working with other organisations who are helping people who are living in challenging conditions so that we can share resources. If someone is working in an area and trying to improve the health within that area, well, then it's useful for us to work with them on that area. So this is a project in Hotwood. It's energy measures. What we do is we recruit households who are energy poor. And the first challenge that we have is to convince people that we don't want anything from them. We're not trying to get them to pay us money. We're not working for an energy supplier, and it is as good as it sounds. We don't make any overboard claims. What we're doing is we go in, we talk to the householders, and that's very important, try to understand how they live their lives, how they use energy, how they relate to their house, what's important for them. I was in a household yesterday, and it was amazing the amount of detailed knowledge that they had on their energy use was just amazing. I was very tempted to bring him in to talk to some of my students because he really understood everything and was so little, I could say. And one of the major issues they had was his letterbox. And there's other small things that you don't think. So it really is important to understand what's important, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. To look at the type of appliances that they had. So all the appliances in the house I was in yesterday were all over 20 years old. We're all working perfectly since. Wouldn't get as many appliances now that would last 20 years or anything like it. Now, obviously, they may not be as energy efficient as the more recent ones, but you're not going to scrap things for sake of scrapping them. So, obviously, we work with the householders, we understand their house, what's important for them, how they use energy, in what way they're struggling. We then provide them with small measures. So they can be everything from chimney balloons to reflective fibre and radiators. We have a kind of a portfolio of small measures, and we work with them to select the package that will work with them, and we help them to apply them if needed. But most of them are materials that the householders can apply themselves. I think in them applying it themselves, they take ownership of actually doing something. And then we provide a bespoke and tailored behavioural change plan with advice and follow-up support over a number of years. So it's quite intensive. In Ireland, we're hoping to reach about 650 houses 150 in Cork, 500 in Dublin, and then we're working in North Macedonia, Bulgaria, Poland, Netherlands, Belgium, so we've quite a range. Working in the Western Isles in Scotland, where it takes an hour to get between maybe one house and another. Working in Macedonia, where you have, you know, large apartment blocks, it couldn't be any more different. So it's quite an interesting approach. We want to find out more information, the details are there. So that's me. If there are any questions, happy to take them.
Well, Mr. One, thanks again. Just at the start, you said that you've done numerous research, like say people's or homeowners' view or opinion on energy.
Yes.
I suppose, is there any common or recurrent themes that you got from the homeowners from their perspective on energy? I
suppose one thing that's probably not apparent to us on work with energy is very invisible. You know, none of us decide to use energy in the morning. We go up and we go and we have a shower because we're coming to a meeting in the Cork International Hotel. You know, we take a bath once a week, whether we need it or not, is the saying goes. So we don't decide to use energy, but energy is so intermeshed and tightly interwoven with our daily practices, and is part of our daily practices. So a lot of energy behaviour, which takes a very rationalist approach. You know, we persuade people to use less energy. You know, MSEI, which is the Irish Energy Authority of Ireland, you know, had a campaign some time ago, the big switch, or switch it off. Or the ones, I can't remember what it was. But, you know, that's not the approach. We need to look at the social practices, why people do things they do. You know, I spoke about the daily shower. Daily shower is now the default thing. In fact, my house, I see the kids, and it could be twice daily showers. You know, whereas I know when I was younger, we didn't have showers, we had baths, and we didn't have them daily, or anything like it. And we still survived. You know, I see again in our own house, we have a small household, so 4 in the house, but we have a washing machine going on every day. You know, that wouldn't have been going on previously. So we need to look at our social practice. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't wash or that we don't wash our clothes. What I'm suggesting that we understand better our social practices, and in that way we can look at the energy savings that we looked at and so forth. And one of the questions earlier mentioned about energy poverty and transport, and it is hugely interlinked. You know, where we build our houses, where we build our places of work, our places of education. You know, that's something that we can't influence as householders, but it's going to impact on the amount of energy that we use in our daily life. So, yeah, energy is very much a social problem. So one of the things I said to students is that, you know, we have been taught that energy is a technical network, a technical system. It's not the social technical system. I would argue actually it's a social system. You know? And that doesn't mean it's any easier. In fact, it means it's more difficult. It's far easier to build the technical systems and make it work. You know, it's a lot harder to get people to change the way that they live their lives.
Particularly since COVID kicked in, obviously across Europe, a lot of more people are now working from home and spending more time in their homes as a result. And you know, there's any research after being done that's kind of showing that the amount of people that are falling into energy poverty has significantly risen as a result.
I know there's a lot of research underway on those issues. I will also say that, again, working from home is quite a middle class thing. A lot of people can't work from home, service providers and so forth, service industries, and many of those who traditionally would be in energy poverty, versus many new people falling into energy. Many people who have traditionally been in energy poverty are not in a position to work from home because of the type of occupations that they're in.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of research. I know it's apparently now we can just put COVID in the grant application and get a grant now. So
Thanks for the tip. Do we have any other questions from anyone in the room?
Yeah, thanks so much. That was a really interesting presentation. I particularly like what you were just saying there about the socio-technical aspects of all this. I just wondering if you could share some more thoughts on how you might best change social practices, given that often they are unconscious and they're so deeply rooted in our daily practices.
Yeah. It's so I think, you know, I suppose I'm not saying that you can't change behaviours and habits. You can. We all know that. We all have things that we have done over it, whether it's giving up smoking or taking up exercise or giving up exercise or whatever it is. So we all change things like that. But and that will take you so far with energy. And I think that's good, and I think that should be supported. And I'm not saying that programs like that don't work. But I think the idea of kind of social norms, of changing social norms, is very important. This aspect of what's expected. So Rose mentioned of working from home, for example. You know, it's a new social norm now for those of us who, you know, who work in office-based jobs to at least work from home or for part of the week. So that has impact on energy use, but also if we take energy use, I suppose, more widely, it means actually reducing our overall energy impact. So it is very much looking at the wider and social practices. A lot of it involves, and I would say this because I'm a researcher, involves more research, but you do need to understand why people do what they do. You know, why the same pair of jeans is going into the washing machine every day. You've noticed 15 other pairs in the press. All of those type of things are on. So it is it's
Do you have to force people to make that change by the likes of carbon tax, etc.? Is that the way that you're going to get big movement?
I would say not. I would say carbon tax, you know, I'm not saying I'm for or against it. I'm actually quite neutral on carbon tax. But I think carbon tax is a blunt instrument.
Is it the lever to force that change?
I don't think it will. I think those who overuse energy, doesn't matter. If you have a BMW parked in your driveway, you know, carbon tax up or down a little bit, it's not going to make any difference. Those people who are in energy poverty, carbon tax will make a big difference. They already know how much to spend. They're already looking at their energy meters and every little difference. As I get, again, I was in a house recently and householder was able to tell me how much it cost to buy the kettle. You know? And they made a decision, you know, that they would wait. You know, like when you were on the breadline, you know. So I think carbon tax is.
You didn't get offered a cup of tea at night.
I did actually, and it was quite nice. But I think carbon tax is part of the street, but I don't think it's I think it's the approach that's taken by many governments, including their own, of ring fencing the carbon tax, put it back in to ameliorate the effects on the disadvantaged. That's the way to go. But I don't think a carbon tax on its own, or any economic measures on its own, are going to be. I think you need a package of economic measures. You need a package of compulsion. You know, the idea of, right, you know, and we can't drive a car on a Sunday in cities. Just ban it. See what happens. You know, like we did it in the 70s. You know, the idea that you can't rent a house unless it's a certain grade. All of those things I think are important.
Now, you mentioned a great presentation, by the way, and you mentioned a couple of things there, but in your research that we can overanalyze who is in fuel poverty and trying to figure out who should be in, who shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
But if someone's willing to put their hand up, it sort of suggests that maybe they should be helped. But the other side, you mentioned food desert as well, and that people who are in food poverty are probably likely to be in fuel poverty as well, that they're all sort of linked. But a lot of the research, you're an expert in the research, seems to be huge amounts of research in the definition of who's in and who's out, rather than getting on with trying to help them and come up with solutions to help them. What are your thoughts on how to get past the noise of just doing the research and actually getting on with helping them?
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing is that it's useful. It's useful for these definitions to be used, and I was making the point that any governments or state agencies who are implementing and policy initiatives need to know that type of information. They need to target it. So the information of before and after and measure impact. That's one thing. But when you're on the ground and you're deciding whether house A or house B is fuel poverty, and if it takes you that much effort and that much resources to find out the difference between them, it's going to be so small and so minuscule that it's going to be counterproductive. You'd be better off putting that resources into actually helping the householders. Also, I suppose, taking a more comprehensive approach to helping these households takes away the stigma. You know, nobody wants to say that they're fuel poor or energy poor. You often thought that the term energy poverty itself was a huge mistake. It's very good to get action from policymakers, but it's not so good when they're trying to reach the householders themselves and talk to them.
Funny you say that, Niall, because there's actually an estate in Kilkenny, which was social housing, but some of the people had bought their own house. The council came in and they did all the social houses in the estate. So they're all up to lovely A2, beautiful houses now, heat pumps, lovely, small energy bills. But the actual people that rode to afford their house are the ones that aren't done, and they stand out like a sore thumb, and they're the ones now that are paying the higher energy bills than all the other ones around them.
Yeah.
So they kind of created a reverse of what normally should be happening.
It would have been quite easy to come up with a scheme
To do them all.
to do them all and put in a payment scheme for those who own their own houses.
So potentially now the people that could actually afford to buy the house are the ones that are in energy poverty. Yeah, crazy. Do we have any other questions?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Niall, for the good presentation. We have anything now? Yeah, so now we have a presentation from Eileen O'Connor from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications. So I'll hand you over to Eileen. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me to speak today as well. And sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm just going to go through a scheme that we ran in Dublin over the last number of years, targeting people in energy poverty. And hopefully it's kind of a good kind of transition over from Niall's presentation, which was kind of the more high level picture. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So the background to the scheme was that there was a publication by the International Energy Agency in 2015 about capturing the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. So kind of not talking anymore only about energy savings and money savings, but also about all the other things that can arise when you put energy efficiency programs in place. And we were also thinking about how to find more people in energy poverty, and also how to find more people in general who wanted to upgrade their homes and to convince them of the benefits of doing so. We took some inspiration from a scheme in New Zealand called the Warm Up New Zealand scheme, which focused on the health benefits of improving the efficiency of people's homes, and did some good research on that. And at the same time, we were also revising the government strategy to combat energy poverty. So with that, we decided to make a commitment in that strategy to a pilot project that would examine the health impacts of energy efficiency improvements in homes. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the scheme aims to establish whether providing free energy efficiency upgrades in homes can have a positive effect on health and well-being of the people living in the homes. The scheme provided extensive upgrades free of charge to lower income households, where there was also someone living in the home with a chronic respiratory condition. So that would be something like chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder or asthma are the two examples there, but there was a longer list of other conditions that people could be experiencing linked to respiratory health. So go to the next slide, please. So when we were trying to decide which conditions to target, we worked with the Health Service Executive here in Ireland, with some public health experts there. And we were looking for conditions that had some of those features that are listed there. So we wanted to pick something that could have a good benefit, I suppose, from the improved energy efficiency of the home. And there's actually loads of conditions that where if you have them improving the thermal efficiency of your home, you can assist with that condition, I suppose. But ultimately we decided on respiratory conditions, but some of the other ones were things like cardiac conditions and also mental health conditions. So next slide, please. So we picked a designated health region. So in Ireland, it's broken up into community healthcare organisations, they're called, CHOs, where there's kind of oversight of community health services and hospital services in a particular region. We also wanted to pick a region where there was maybe slightly higher deprivation than other regions, and that we knew there'd be a sufficient cohort of individuals that could benefit from the scheme. So we picked CHO 7, which is parts of Dublin, parts of Wicklow, and parts of Kildare, which are in the east of the country. So the scheme is governed by a steering group from my department, which is the Environment and Climate Department, and then also the Department of Health. And then we had an implementation team from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland and the Health Service Executive with different expertise on that. So some people were there because they worked on public health, and then others were there more from an academic research side to give us the insights we would need, I suppose, because we were coming from the energy background. And then we had program management from an external provider that was able to kind of bring us all together and keep us motivated and keep the meetings going at a regular enough occurrence and make sure that everything was happening. Because I think often with these kind of projects where there's multiple agencies involved, if there isn't someone driving it, it can kind of fall off a bit. So it's funded by my department as well. The Department of Energy at the time, but now it's Environment, Climate and Communications. And the initial commitment was 20 million to be spent in that region. So go to the next slide then, please. So in terms of looking for people to participate, we relied heavily on the Health Service Executive again, so public health in the region. So that extended to public health nurses, GPs, physiotherapists, social workers, all different types of people who were already providing services to people in the area. So not necessarily anyone who had anything to do with energy efficiency or any of the things that we would be used to talking about. We also use local media, so local newspapers. We talked to pharmacies, principals in schools, parish priests were also involved, newsletters, things like that. Local politicians, obviously, as well. And then we just used the different partners' websites. But interestingly enough, word of mouth eventually became the main route to participation. So if someone saw their neighbour getting the scheme done, they knocked in and asked, oh, what's going on here? And then checked to see if they were eligible as well. So that became the main route to participation. So the next slide there, please. So the SEAI, the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, they delivered the energy efficiency upgrades. The homes were surveyed, and pretty much from a list of measures, everything was provided then to the house that was appropriate for the house. So it extended to attic and wall insulation, window and door replacement, obviously the appropriate ventilation to go with the insulation, draft proofing, and then in some cases heating systems were installed. Some houses didn't have any central heating, so they received heating systems and then heating system upgrades, as well as heating controls on systems that were already working. And the works were carried out by contractors who were working directly for SEAI already on their national warmer home scheme that Enda referred to at the beginning. So they were the contractors that we used to deliver the works. So next slide, please. So what was important in delivering the scheme was kind of acknowledging that it was a different cohort of people that were involved, that they did have these chronic respiratory conditions that probably limited their ability to, move around the house or to vacate the house for longer periods of time. So we were very conscious that the process in getting the work done was ultimately going to make things better and not worse for anybody living in the home. So the contractors received specific training and guidance from the public health professionals. So they were able to give them guidance on how to kind of manage the homeowners that would be involved, supporting them in even filling out applications, loads of communication about what was going to happen, when it was going to happen, explaining what different things were, explaining how to use things like the heating controls, explaining about ventilation and the importance of not blocking it off and things like that. And just generally speaking in the homeowner's language, as opposed to the energy efficiency language that the contractors would be used to kind of speaking to people in. And that was really about learning from the public health professionals who are doing this every day. So just getting their insights was really valuable. So next slide, please. So the scheme wasn't just about providing the works. Obviously, we want to measure what's happening. So participants who were signed up to get the works done were then also asked if they would participate in the research. So anyone who consented received an assessment, a health assessment from the HSC public health team, and they were then tracked over a 3-year period following the upgrade to their home. So we used a number of research questionnaires and tools that were administered to each person, so that they included things like specific respiratory health questionnaires, a general health and well-being questionnaire, and then a questionnaire that attempted to measure quality of life as well. And that there was also a visual kind of assessment of the home by the healthcare professional to look at things like whether there was mold in the home before the works were done, whether the home seemed damp or cold, and things like that. So next slide, please. So the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine are actually carrying out an analysis of all the information that was gathered then to try to determine what the health impacts of the upgrade might have been. So they're looking at things such as changes in hospitalization, GP visits, medication usage, general well-being and mental health, social participation. That was actually a really big one that we hadn't thought about in it before the project, that people became much more open to having visitors to their home, or to even going out to participate in things like men's sheds was mentioned as something that people then felt confident going to participate in. Just their general sense of being able to interact outside the home and inside the home just improved a lot. And then just to mention that the Warm Up New Zealand study had found a significant lower mortality rate for participants in their scheme. So we should be able to see whether something like that it also applies in Ireland when this research is completed. So next slide, please. So the initial experience of the participants is really positive. People are talking about how their living environment has improved. No damp anymore, no condensation on the windows. People have talked about having lower bills, fewer hospital visits for their conditions, fewer prescriptions being needed. And then, yeah, just like what I said a few minutes ago, improved outlook on life and likelihood to participate in the community. And then another one was, I think it's probably due to having the windows and doors replaced, a sense of personal security in the home, that it's I suppose quieter. You can hear less from outside, and you just feel like that the house is just a better place to be. So next slide, please. I was just going to talk then a little bit about when you're kind of devising a scheme like this, or a pilot scheme, that what's important to keep in mind is what the scheme is going to be and what it's not going to be. So what we were thinking about was, a different approach to addressing energy poverty, a sort of avenue into different departments to talking about energy efficiency and how it can how it can also influence their policy areas and achieve multiple aims, that it's going to be research and evidence-based, and that it's a pilot, and that it wasn't going to be something that we just rolled out immediately without kind of researching the ins and outs of it first, or that it was going to be used to kind of tie existing things together that hadn't previously been measured, and that wasn't going to be the only thing that was happening in the area that was identified. So next slide, please. So that's just some of the things that we thought about when we were devising the scheme. So that's, I won't go through all of that, but it's probably more interesting for anyone who's thinking about developing a scheme at the moment. There are some of the areas that you might want to touch off when you're drawing it up. So then next slide, please. So I just have 2 slides here on delivering the scheme and things to kind of keep in mind while you're doing that. So just being really focused on the original rationale and kind of not letting it creep into other areas without evidence being, I suppose, found for that. What you're doing, who's in charge. So like while our department was funding the scheme, we weren't going to be aware of things that were happening operationally for HSE or SCAI. So it was really important that they were also working together to make sure that the people participating were supported and things like that. And then who the scheme is for, and just being really clear on eligibility and where you're delivering the scheme. So next slide, please. Yeah, so who you're going to use to deliver the scheme and what training they might need. I touched off that earlier, just about the contractors receiving training from the HSE when there's different perhaps clients or customers involved and they wouldn't normally be used to. And then just having a clear timeline for the scheme and what you want to deliver. So next slide, please. So they're just some of the lessons learned. Originally we put the scheme in place and it was going to be a 3-year scheme, but we're still actually completing some of the homes while the research element has been closed off in terms of collecting information from people. Some of the homes haven't been completed, so those people obviously aren't participating in the research, but because they signed up, they'll still get the work done on their property. But because of COVID, I suppose in 2020 and 2021, we weren't able to go into those homes to get those works done, especially with those participants who would have been more vulnerable to COVID if they had caught COVID. So that was really important that we had to pause the scheme. So yeah, just being prepared for the long haul, just differences in different agencies and ministries, and making sure that you're, so we were funding it, but obviously there was perspectives that we had to bring into the project from the HSE that ended up being really important in delivering it. So yeah, then just how you find people, I talked about that earlier. Management of it, that was where it was really important to have the project management from external project management to make sure that everything was managed properly. So collecting the data, delivery channels, finding the right partners, the benefits that might arise. So I talked about that as well, the social participation that we hadn't really thought of in advance, and then international experience. So checking whether similar projects are happening. So like that project in New Zealand. And then I just have a final slide then on just one customer's experience. That was really nice. So we can leave that up there. And then if anyone has any questions on it, I'm happy to take those.
Riley. Do you have any questions from the floor for Riley? Sorry, yeah, go on, Brian.
Yes, I'm Brian Cassidy, Cork City Council. Is that very
Hi,
good?
Brian.
I've been following it for the last number of years. Is there any plan to roll it out elsewhere or to do a trial elsewhere in the country?
So the research is ongoing, and we're hoping to have a report, I suppose, in the next couple of months. But something that has happened kind of back in 2015, we were really thinking about how can we get more budget and how can we get more people to participate. And I think you're probably aware that since then there's been a huge focus on retrofit kind of across the board. And the national scheme has also changed to delivering the types of works that this scheme was delivering. So I think it's probably something we haven't quite decided yet, but I think what this is going to be really useful for is a kind of a selling point for retrofit, almost, for people who maybe are doing that work themselves. So it's an additional kind of you know, this can help improve your health if that's something that you're thinking about, as well as your kind of environmental benefits and saving money and having a warmer home. And then I think, you know, obviously depending on the outcome of the research, it could also be something that we maybe prioritize under the free schemes. If there are people with health conditions, that could be how we roll it out, just for the benefit of people who aren't familiar with the schemes here in Ireland. The one Enda spoke about at the beginning, the Warmer Home Scheme, is nationally available to people on lower incomes. And at the time when we put this pilot in place, that national scheme was only providing shallow works, but now the national scheme provides more extensive retrofits. So I think, yeah, it's something we'll obviously be thinking about when we see the final report. But that might be how it's incorporated, if that makes sense. Brian, did I answer your question? Sorry.
No, thanks very much, yeah.
Okay, great.
Any other questions from the floor? No, do you have any online, Howard?
There's one here from Daniel. He wants to know how we handle the fact that the upgrades increase the value of the property.
Yeah, it's a good question. So under the national scheme, there is a waiver where you have to sign to say that you'll let SCAI know if you sell your property within a certain number of years. So that's to kind of, I suppose, make sure that people maybe aren't, you know, taking advantage of the scheme or anything like that. And that did also apply to this scheme, but it's really rare. Like these are the people who receive these works are genuinely in need, and they're households that are lower income households. They don't tend to be looking at this as an opportunity to sell the house on. Unfortunately, sometimes people do pass away who are living in the houses, and those properties do get sold by their families or whoever comes into ownership of the house. Yeah, so there's a waiver in place basically where you have to notify SCAI if you do sell the home within a certain number of years, and they can take steps then to claw back, I suppose, some of the additional value that the retrofit provided to the property. So that's how we handled it. But just to say that it doesn't really happen. It hasn't really arisen as something that we've had to implement, I suppose.
I have a question. Just in terms of the approach that you take in selecting the householders, obviously a lot of them are, as you say, fuel poor on certain benefits, etc., or whatever the case may be. And as Noah was saying earlier on, there's kind of this discretionary band that are not quite there, but they should be there, or they're kind of borderline people. Do you think that there should be some kind of system in place, that there's an appeals procedure, and that discretionary measures can be taken to kind of push people over so that they can avail of this?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we had plenty of people who met the criteria that came forward. So if it had been a situation where there weren't enough participants that met our original criteria, that probably would have been something we might have looked at. I think eligibility for schemes more generally is definitely something where there's always going to be someone that falls, like, you know, slightly over the threshold for participation. On our national scheme, we have over 7,000 households waiting for works who all meet the eligibility criteria. So it's a difficult one to say that you would start broadening it out when you have so many who are on the lower incomes, waiting for the work to be done. So it's definitely something we're conscious of, that eligibility is not perfect. We have committed to looking at that more widely in the context of the Climate Action Plan, and how we can put something in place that will ensure we're getting to the right people. One change we made to the national scheme.
Is there like an appeals procedure? If someone doesn't meet the eligibility, they can appeal that decision?
No, the eligibility is set. Like you meet it or you don't. So that's what's in place at the moment. There isn't an appeals procedure. No. No.
That's my question. Any other questions?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, thanks very much for that presentation, Eileen.
No problem.